Marble steps are cool at dawn. Olive leaves still hold the night. Smoke is curling slow and thin. Names I whisper to the light. Sing, oh, sing to the stones and sky. Let the old words rise. Let the old words rise.
Så folkens, welcome back to another video. We are heading into part 8 of Rise of Augustus. So, last episode, Sextus were seeming to kind of win in some regards. I don't still get like the navy battles and where they like send in some troops and that's like half the army is just waiting and then running away afterwards. It's kind of weird. So yeah, I'm not really that impressed with Octavian. Octavian isn't really that great of a commander. But I guess like I don't know how long he was at that military camp where he started. But yeah, like he's definitely being carried right now. Like he's not that great at it. Sextus, it seemed that he was on his way to a win, but it seems that is gone now. So yeah, I'm curious to see what actually happens to Sextus after this war. So, and what will kind of, I guess, spark the war between Octavian and Antony. I'm curious to see if we are going to see that soon. So yeah, let's go.
It had been Agrippa's finest hour so far, and had given Octavian the clear victory he so badly needed. In the immediate aftermath, Sextus fled to Messana, abandoning his army in the area. Leaderless, they quickly surrendered to Octavian.
Yeah.
Sextus recalled the 8 legions around Lilybaeum, seemingly intending to make
this is the problem with this is something that Caesar really understood really well, is that like this is a civil war. So it's not like it isn't two sides fighting for a country or a nation or anything like that. This is a civil war between two dudes from the same nation. So the most popular guy, they might just surrender to that guy and save face because they don't own, like, they don't need to give like their full loyalty to it. And I kind of forgot his name, the guy from the last episode that just switched side, like every time he was switching underwear, he was like, yeah, let's take on the Octavian underwear today, and tomorrow we might put on the Sextus underwear. How that guy wasn't killed for just being an absolute disgrace is beyond me. So, yeah.
stand with them.
But the point is that Caesar never really left like his soldiers behind. Like he always made sure to go and get them. And that kind of helped him in the long run because it gave him a lot of loyalty from his soldiers. Like he never left anyone behind. And yeah. So.
Around Messana. However, before they arrived, more and more of Sextus's inner circle began to defect, and Sextus abandoned the island of Sicily with his family, sailing in secrecy to Antony, hoping that he would find safety there in recompense for Sextus having given sanctuary to Antony's mother in the past. The Pompeian legions that arrived in Messana found themselves leaderless and were quickly besieged by the Caesarian armies under the command of Lepidus and Agrippa. The Pompeians quickly sent peace envoys to negotiate, Agrippa being ordered not to concede anything until Octavian arrived on the scene. Lepidus, however, had other plans, and agreed to allow the Pompeian legions to join him, granting them the right to sack Messana in return. Lepidus and Pompey's men thus plundered the city throughout the night, Agrippa's legions maintaining their position outside the city. Combined with his forces from Africa, Lepidus now had a total of 21 legions under his personal command, roughly equal to those under Octavian and Agrippa. He now chose to make his move.
What move?
Declaring himself as the conqueror of Sicily, Lepidus sent word to towns in Sicily to reject any envoys sent from Octavian and listen only to those sent by himself. Octavian reacted quickly, confronting Lepidus, who offered Octavian control of Sicily and North Africa in return for Gaul, Hispania.
I do not blame Lepidus for this, honestly, because like Octavian and Mark Antony has been screwing this guy every single time he has created peace between them. So yeah, I kind of get it. I'm pro Lepidus.
Yeah, and Illyricum. Effectively, it was an offer to restore the separation initially agreed upon in 43 BC by the Second Triumvirate. Octavian, of course, refused. The soldiers began to worry that after just having proved victorious in the Sicilian campaign against Sextus, they would be swept into another war between Lepidus and Octavian. The latter got wind of these misgivings, and initially sent agents into Lepidus's camp to gauge the loyalties of the legions, before entering himself, leaving a significant cavalry bodyguard at the gates. Many of the previously Pompeian legions were worried that the peace treaty would not be valid unless Octavian endorsed it. Many of Lepidus's men were embittered that they had to share the spoils of looting Messana with men they had only recently been fighting against. Octavian proclaimed that he would accept all who wanted to join him, and many pledged their loyalty there and then. In his tent, Lepidus heard that his army was dissolving and stormed out. A fight of some kind broke out, one of Octavian's entourage getting killed, and Octavian himself almost getting wounded.
Damn.
Octavian retreated to his cavalry, and what happened next is not entirely clear. Appian paints a picture of Octavian with only his cavalry engaging in some kind of fighting with Lepidus's men that remained loyal, but that eventually more and more of his men defected, a trickle becoming a flood. Cassius Dio's version differs. According to his account, after entering Lepidus's camp, Octavian was soundly rebuffed by the men and resorted to besieging the camp, Lepidus's men defecting throughout the course of the siege as the only practical option, despite having high respect for Lepidus.
Damn.
Effectively, one version has Octavian's power of personality convincing droves of men to his side, with an incompetent Lepidus being unaware of what was going on and losing almost all his legions after a short scuffle with Octavian, while the other has Octavian needing to effectively force Lepidus's men to join him through the threat of siege. Octavian, a master propagandist, managed to heavily control the narrative following the end of the Civil War. Such discrepancies are relatively common, and there is often bias in favor of Octavian and against his enemies.
Yeah.
The consensus...
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, because like Octavian does become like the leader of everything, and like he definitely had some influence on how things were written. I'm 100% sure of that. So yeah, this might be pretty heavily placed in Octavian's, the bias for Octavian.
Of modern historians is that the most likely course of events was somewhere in the middle. Octavian marched into the camp with his bodyguard, managing to win over some men, but the majority stayed loyal to Lepidus. As a result, Octavian used force to threaten the loyalists to join his side. The end result, however, is clear. The entirety of Lepidus's army, all 21 legions, passed over to Octavian's command.
Damn.
This was, in effect, the end of Lepidus's career.
Yeah.
In the aftermath,
Ooh.
he was stripped of the powers of a triumvir, and Octavian and Antony stood alone as the rulers of the Republic.
Damn.
Lepidus has gone down in history as incompetent and a bit of a fool, largely thanks to pro-Octavian and anti-Lepidus biased sources. It is a rather damning evaluation. Lepidus had played the game well, but the decks were arguably stacked against him.
Yeah.
Antony and Octavian both had the benefit of being much more apparent heirs to Caesar's legacy, and both benefited from the resources left by Caesar after he died. His final gambit in Sicily was possibly the best move he could make given the circumstances. He had a strong army in the area, and the offer he made to Octavian was not as unfair as it may initially seem.
Yeah, it was a pretty
Africa
good
and
deal.
Sicily, now that they had been reined in under Caesarian control, had long been two of the Republic's most productive areas, and Lepidus did not try to cut Octavian out of the triumvirate entirely. Unfortunately for him, however, he was matched against one of the greatest political titans of history, Octavian. One point regarding Lepidus that perhaps is too easily overlooked is that he survived despite losing his triumvir powers. He would later die at the ripe old age of 76.
Yeah.
Though his career was admittedly rather lackluster after the Sicilian campaign, few men could claim to have supported Julius Caesar, survived the aftermath of his assassination, and challenged Octavian, but nonetheless lived to tell the tale.
Yeah.
He was shrewd often to avoid the frequent conflicts between Octavian and Antony. Though we should not get ahead of ourselves and laud him as a political genius, dismissing him as an incompetent fool seems inaccurate and unjust.
Yeah.
With Sextus having fled the island and his legions deserted to the Caesarian side, Octavian's invasion of Sicily was over. Disasters had plagued it at the beginning, but a combination of sheer tenacity on his behalf and the talented generalship of Agrippa had assured victory. With the taking of Sicily, the last Pompeian holdout, the faction was effectively crushed. However, Sextus survived the ordeal and successfully made it to Asia Minor. There he hoped to find mercy under the protection of the only man now powerful enough to challenge Octavian, Antony. Antony, however, was currently in the middle of his own military expedition, the Roman invasion of Parthia.
Yeah.
Antony had been planning the campaign for a significant amount of time.
I'm really curious to see how much of Parthia Antony is able to get, like, I don't know, like, I never seen the Roman maps get to, like, over here before, so I don't know what happens here, because, like, we've heard several times that there's been, like, failure in Parthian campaigns against the Parthians. But, like, it was so easy to kick them out of Asia Minor. Like, I don't know. Like, how tough are they? I guess we'll see. But this time it's Antony that's going, like, one of the best military commanders.
In 37 BC, been forced to delay the invasion in order to assist Octavian's war against Sextus, lending naval support in return for the promise of 4 of Octavian's legions.
Yeah.
Before these promised men could arrive, however, an opportunity presented itself to Antony. Ventidius's victory over the Parthians included the death of the Parthian heir Pacorus. In 37 BC, his brother, Phraates IV, took the throne, and in order to secure his position, purged the royal court, executing many family members and nobles.
Yeah.
Many nobles fled for their lives, and one of these, Meneses, came to Antony, informing him of the internal chaos in Parthia, and claiming that he would be able to bring much of Parthia over to Antony's side. For Antony, this was a golden opportunity. The Parthians were still recovering from the defeats suffered at the hands of Ventidius, and were seemingly fractured internally. Seizing on the opportunity, Antony put his plans into motion.
It's a trap.
Near the start of 36 BC, a lieutenant of his, Canidius, was sent to the Caucasus to guarantee the loyalty of the Armenian king, Artavasdes III, and led a rapid campaign into Iberia and Albania to secure the northern flank. Antony, meanwhile, massed his legions and prepared to attack.
I've always wondered, like, why Rome doesn't just take over these places, like, instead of having, like, these uncertain rulers. Like, I don't get that. Like, you see it again with, like, Judea, Cappadocia, Galatia, Pontus, like, and they had, like, 3 wars with these guys I need to check out too. Like, I heard Pompey is probably part of some Pompey the Goat's videos. I need to check that out. But Armenia too, like, why not just conquer it? I don't get that. What do Rome get out of that?
Phraates, however, became aware
Like, do they pay tribute to Rome?
of Menasses' defection.
Because then I could like get it, right? Right, like they pay tribute and you don't have to waste resources to keep the land going. But still.
And, likely through the use of huge bribes and promises, was able to win him back over to the Parthian side. Antony tried to capitalize on the situation by demanding the return of the Roman prisoners and eagle standards that had been lost by Crassus at Carrhae, effectively trying to turn Menasses' defection into an agreed-upon deal, but Phraates refused. This must have been a blow.
They're still prisoners from that war. Damn.
To Antony's strategy, but nevertheless, the Parthians still seemed vulnerable, so Antony continued with his plan. A campaign against the Parthians had supposedly been originally planned by Caesar, and preparations for this had already begun by the time he was assassinated. Having learned from Crassus's disastrous mistake at Carrhae of facing the Parthians on flat, open ground, Caesar instead intended to attack from the north into Media Atropatene, where the mountainous terrain would favor Roman legions over Parthian cavalry. Antony would follow a similar route, using Armenia as a staging ground for the invasion, and enrolling the help of Artavasdes and his thousands of cavalry, an invaluable counter to the Parthians' mobile armies. Moreover, Media Atropatene was not in fact part of the Parthian Empire proper. Instead, it was ruled by its own Median king, also called Artavasdes, who was a close ally, effectively a vassal of the Parthians. The Median and Armenian kings were bitter enemies, so Antony was confident of Armenian support. Initially, Antony appeared to have planned to cross the Euphrates and make a dash for Armenia before the Parthian forces could react. However, when he reached the Euphrates, he found the crossing was already defended, so he was forced to take a longer route to Armenia instead. This, and the need to wait for Canidius's campaign to finish, delayed Antony. By the time all the pieces were in place, the campaign season was nearing an end, and winter was looming on the horizon. Antony had, however, always been a risk-taker. He planned to make a bold attack on the Median capital, Phrata, where the wife and children of the Median king were, and quickly take the city, presumably to use the royal family as leverage. If he moved quickly enough, and all went well, there was just enough time left in the season to seize this objective before winter set in.
How bad is winter in that area? Like, I can get, like, in Europe, as an example, like, they have, like, okay, now winter is coming, let's go in and wait out the winter till spring. This is the desert, like, come on, there can't be snow there. Is there? I don't know the climate in that area, I just know it's hot, like, crazy.
To conduct the campaign, Antony had gathered a large force. There is a dispute among the sources, with his troops ranging from 13 to 18 legions, though most modern historians tend to favor a number around 16 to 18 legions. Depending on the strength of these legions, and when adding allies to the total, Antony may have had anywhere between 60 and 100,000 men.
Damn.
A truly colossal number, far larger than Caesar's armies used to conquer Gaul, and rivaling the size of the armies that fought at the climactic Battle of Philippi. Even without the Armenians, Antony's force included nearly 10,000 cavalry and thousands of missile troops, particularly slingers. Antony, it seems, had learnt from both Crassus and Ventidius that cavalry and light infantry were crucial for fighting the Parthians, and had planned accordingly.
Yeah.
Despite winter closing in, Antony launched his campaign. To allow his legions to move faster, he separated the slow-moving supplies and siege engines under the command of Statianus with 2 legions and the Armenians to defend them, while he moved ahead with the majority of his force to attack Phrata. Upon reaching the city, Antony immediately launched several assaults against it, but the defenses were strong and his men were repulsed.
That's a lot of defense.
Antony began the construction of siege works and encamped his army around the city, awaiting the arrival of the siege engines. The Parthians had not, however, been idle.
Oh no.
While Antony had been making his preparations, Phraates had managed to assemble a force of 40,000 cataphracts and horse archers to assist the Medians. These Parthians and their Median allies fell upon Statianus' force. The 2 legions left to guard the supplies and siege engines were easily wiped out, and their standards were taken. Statianus died in the fighting. The Armenians, now cut off from Antony, abandoned the campaign completely, returning home, while the Parthian Median force destroyed all of the Roman siege equipment.
Oh no.
It was a devastating start to the campaign for the Romans.
Yeah.
When this news reached Antony, he gathered 10 of his legions and marched quickly to try and save Statianus, leaving the rest of his army to continue the siege of Phrata. By the time he arrived, though, the fighting was long over. Antony, nevertheless, pursued the Parthians, looking to force a pitched battle. He eventually managed to find them in the field, drawing his infantry into a tight formation and having his cavalry charge whenever the Parthians drew close, followed quickly by the Roman infantry, thus chasing the Parthians from the field with the Roman cavalry in hot pursuit.
Be careful.
Antony initially thought he had won a decisive victory, but by the end
Is this a feigned retreat to get the Romans out of formation?
of the day, less than 100 Parthians lay dead, the vast majority easily outpacing their pursuers. Furthermore, upon returning to Phrata, he learned that the defenders had sallied out, pushing the Romans back and sabotaging some of their siege equipment. Antony was apparently so furious that he had some of the legions charged with. Antony was now in a potentially disastrous situation.
Yeah.
With no siege engines, the siege of Phrata would drag even longer, and with winter around the corner and a
How can he continue the siege when he doesn't have any supplies? His supply line is destroyed, and so is his supplies. Good
The
portion
army
of his army too.
behind him, Antony's position was completely untenable. Fortunately for him, Phraates was eager for a quick conclusion to the war, likely because the winter would take its toll on his own men, and because he was looking to further secure his rule over Parthia. As a result, Phraates offered Antony very generous terms, urging Antony to simply leave Media peacefully before he lost more men to famine and winter. Antony initially tried again to request the Roman prisoners and standards from Carrhae, but was once again rebuffed. With no strength in his bargaining position, Antony's force lifted the siege, broke camp, and made for the Araxes River, the border between Media and Armenia. As he was breaking camp, a guide approached Antony, either a prisoner from Carrhae who had made it to the Roman lines, or a son of Menesses. He warned Antony that the Parthians were planning to attack while the Romans were in the open, marching back to Armenia, and urged Antony to take a different route home. The Roman general took the advice, and for 3 days, the army followed the guide, avoiding all conflict with the Parthians. On the 4th day, though, the Parthian force found them. The forces drew up for battle, the Parthians threatening to encircle the Romans. In response, Antony had his light infantry and missiles charge out from his lines and attack, the slingers and skirmishers inflicting many casualties on the Parthians, before amassing a bulk of his cavalry to charge and scatter the enemy. Antony knew that he could not afford to be bogged down, however. If the army stopped moving, he would be surrounded and likely destroyed.
Ooh, damn.
Instead, he formed his army into a hollow square, with light infantry and missiles on the flanks and rear,
That's
with
a
cavalry
cool
in support.
formation.
When the Parthians drew too close, the missile troops would skirmish with them, before the Roman cavalry would charge and chase the Parthians off, but not pursue them. Using these tactics, Antony was able to keep his army slowly moving towards the Araxes, with minimal losses for about 4 days. On the 5th, one of his officers, Gallus, requested a force of light infantry and cavalry to attack the Parthians and try to break the cycle. Antony agreed, and Gallus's force launched their attack. Initially, they were successful, but rather than withdrawing back to the Roman lines, they attempted to press the attack. This inevitably resulted in Gallus being cut off. Antony's officers seem to have been rather reluctant to commit to the fight, only sending small reinforcement groups to try and relieve Gallus, all of which were subsequently surrounded and destroyed. Antony himself eventually had to come to Gallus's rescue with the entirety of the 3rd Legion. According to Plutarch, by the time Antony was able to intervene, 3,000 of his men lay dead and another 5,000 wounded. By this point, the Romans' lack of supplies was also starting to take its toll. The army was forced to scavenge what they could from the land, and unfamiliar with the territory, a significant number became sick after eating poisonous herbs and consuming unclean drinking water.
Damn.
Nevertheless, Antony was able to keep the army moving. Attacked once more by the Parthians, he had the legions form testudos and again fended the attack with light infantry and cavalry. Finally, the river was in sight, and the Romans began the process of transporting their men across. To their surprise, at least in Plutarch's telling of events, the Parthians effectively let them leave without attacking the Romans when they were at their most vulnerable, some Parthian soldiers supposedly even shouting farewells to the Romans. It had been 27 days since the army had left Fratta, with as many as 18 engagements with the Parthians being fought. The army was ragged, and despite now being in friendly territory, they were still weak and vulnerable. The Armenian winter would result in the deaths of thousands more before they could reach safety. While Antony was furious with the Armenian king for his earlier betrayal, he was currently desperate for supplies. He was in no position to force a military confrontation, and was forced to feign friendship and bide his time. The total number of casualties that Antony's army had sustained vary significantly depending on the source. Livy gives the 2 legions lost under Statianus and another 8,000 to weather. Paterculus suggests 25% of Antony's military force, Florus a third, and Plutarch approximately 45,000. The huge amount of propaganda that surrounded this campaign makes it almost impossible to distinguish the real number. At the very least, all the sources agree that Antony lost at least 2 legions and thousands more to weather and disease. While it is certainly true that Antony's losses were significant then, it is worth recognizing some of Antony's achievements. He had been forced into a very similar position to Crassus, low on supplies in hostile territory and hounded by a large Parthian force. Whereas Crassus's generalship had resulted in the complete annihilation of his army, Antony had managed to conduct an admirable fighting withdrawal and avoided the complete destruction of his force. Moreover, Plutarch, though often critical of Antony, also stresses that his men never lost faith in him, even proclaiming him imperator. A flawed man in many ways, Antony was nevertheless an excellent soldier, well liked, and excelled in seemingly disastrous situations. Without his generalship, it is possible that the entire force would have been annihilated.
Yeah, plus, like, Antony, he did mess up having such a little guard for the supplies, I would say, but his strategy wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad strategy, yeah.
Antony's Atropatene campaign remains a topic of debate among modern scholars, not least because of the propaganda surrounding it. Both Antony and Octavian were masters of spin, and knew the importance of controlling a narrative. In the immediate aftermath of Antony's campaign, both men pushed their own agendas. Antony claiming the campaign to be a resounding success, Octavian damning it as an abject failure, blurring the truth almost immediately.
Damn, I could just imagine Octavian being like, so, how do you think this went? Antony just sitting there like, it went great. It was amazing. Great weather, great people.
There are several sources that have survived which discuss the campaign, including Livy, Paterculus, Josephus, Frontinus, Strabo, and Florus, but the most detailed accounts come from Plutarch and Cassius Dio. Neither are
That's also the only 2 people I actually know the names of.
ideal sources. Plutarch, by his own admission, was not a historian, but a biographer, while Cassius Dio was writing centuries after the events, with more of an interest in politics than military affairs, and with a distinct bias towards Augustus. Where any of these writers originally got their information regarding the campaign is an ongoing topic of debate. A participant and eyewitness.
Are there any Parthian sources for this period that might be? I mean, it wouldn't be less biased, but like when we look at like the rivalry between Octavian and Antony, it might even be a little less biased than their sources.
Of the campaign, Quintus Dellius, wrote a history of it, which is now lost and may have been used by later writers. There is, however, very little evidence to show to what extent he was used. More importantly, some very significant differences between the sources show that they were not all using Dellius, and that multiple narratives were circulating. Moreover, Dellius himself had his own problems. He had fought under Antony, and so it might be thought that he would have a pro-Antony bias. But Dellius was notorious for changing sides multiple times.
Plus, if he fought under Antony, perhaps he was there, he also would have had a more, like, a better description of what actually happened. So, I mean, all sources at this time period is extremely biased, like.
And wrote his history while siding with Augustus.
What we only really know for sure is what happened. We don't know exactly how and what exact consequences there were, because everyone is playing the political game in that period. Sounds familiar?
So he may in fact have presented a damning view of Antony. In either case, he is inevitably biased. In all likelihood, some of the surviving sources were instead based on the accounts pushed by either Antony or Octavian. The extent to which they can be trusted, and therefore the extent to which Antony either failed or succeeded, is debatable.
Yeah.
The first.
Alright. Oh. This is part 8. Damn. Okay, the Parthian invasion was really disappointing, honestly. Yeah. I had hoped for something a bit better, but it is what it is. Yeah, I'm really excited to like learn more about the area. I think Parthia controls like what's Iraq, Iran, yeah, that area. So yeah, damn. So Sextus is over, Lepidus is over. Now it's just Antony and Octavian. And Octavian might even get stronger now that Antony had lost a bunch of soldiers and influence. Like, he's still loved by his soldiers, but like that's exactly as much as before. I would honestly think. So yeah. Alright. The original video will be down in the description. If you guys want to check out some more history videos, I'll have playlist up on screen. Otherwise, see you guys there. Bye.
Bare feet in the furrowed ground, dust on my tongue, heat bearing down, sun like a hammer on my back, name I was born with, they took that. But my chains flow soft like water, running through this tired soul. You can bind my hands together, you can't cage what rivers know.